Shannon. Welcome. Episode 001 of What's the Word? This is really meant to be a forum all about separating myth from magnetic when it comes to reputation building and influence. A space for support, experience swapping, and the sanity check storytellers need right now. And, I think everyone has like back to school on the brain, but for a lot of folks within Antland, it's actually that like deep breath in that you don't really get to exhale until close to winter break because agency of the year programs between Ad Week and Ad Age and Campaign US. It is a gauntlet for comms folks. And so I wouldn't want to have this conversation with anyone else because both of you are really, really unique and just the blend of experience that you have. So for folks who are listening in, I just want to be clear on the rules of engagement that were set is I want Jameson and Shannon to speak to universal truths and beliefs that they hold versus a specific program because they have played in different ways. But no matter the award you're submitting for, the hope and intention is that like it helps fuel you and doing dope submissions or maybe making the decision to not submit. So let's kind of jump in. For agencies biting their fingernails on whether they should or should not submit for Agency of the Year honors, what considerations would you have them think through?
Shannon, I'll let you go first on this one since you've been both on the submitting side and the judging side.
Oh man. There's agency of the year always feels like that foregone conclusion for a lot of agencies. It's like this sort of like compulsion of like, okay, it's not a matter of if, but how and when. Um, and it's understandable. It's sort of like this, it allows you this opportunity to really take a look at your past year. And also, it's a great strategy point for the following year. So I definitely understand why agencies feel as if entering agency of the year is this like absolute in their calendars. Also, you so much work goes into all of the creativity that you do all year. It almost feels like, well, if we don't enter, what does that really say about our work? What does it tell us about how we feel about the work that we've done in the past year if we don't make that effort? And to you, what I would say, or what I'd counter with that is you can do a ton of good work. You can do a ton of even like great work. Agency of the Year is it's such a bloodbath. I mean, let's just be very clear about what this is, that you really have to be judicious about like whether or not it is going to be worth it for you in the end, especially because they do tend to come with a hefty price tag. Um, it's okay to sit with your past year and say, we had a great year. There's so many things that we can celebrate. We don't necessarily have to celebrate by entering a costly award system. Um, really take the time to sit with not only your work, but how you've moved as an agency, how you feel you've imprinted on the industry, how you've grown, and be honest and just say like, hey, do we really have a compelling story to tell in the end? And if you have to think about it, or if your answer is like, nah, maybe it's okay to sit this year out and really take the time to build that narrative, because that's what these award submissions are at the end of the day, right? It's basically an existing narrative of your agency. And if you feel like it's not compelling or interesting enough, the judges aren't going to either. And if you are, even if you're an agency that won or, has done well, it's okay to look at it and say, last year we had a really great year. This year, comparatively, not so much. Maybe we could be a little bit quieter this year. it's okay.
Right. And that's a really good point that you bring up, Shannon, because for a lot of agencies that win, sometimes the win becomes the identity, and the agency spends the next year saying, we were agency of the year. And they don't actually take any activities to actually make them viable to become agency of the year the next year, right? And that for winners, I think across the board, what I hear is it's a heavier weight system. If you won, there is more scrutiny to like you have to grow that much more. You have to do like a level of work that's just like that that much crisper or more creative. So any thoughts you want to add, Jameson?
Yeah, I'll be brief on this one because I think Shannon covered a lot. Obviously, if you've had a great year, enter no matter what. And I think my answer to this has also changed in the last couple of weeks because before ad weeks was free. And it was always like, well, if you have anything interesting, you submit if you have the time to do it because you just want to get in front of them. Now that that one is also a paid to enter, you have to be a little more selective to what you do. But the other thing is, if you don't think you're a winning agency, you have kind of two paths. One is if you've had a really not great year and you don't think next year is going to be a winning potential year for you, I would say don't enter. Like, don't waste your time. Don't go through that. But if you think you're like 2 years away from winning, or like next year you could win, I would enter, show where you're at, and then so that the next year, when you do think you could have a big year ahead of you, you're like there. Because if you don't enter one year and then all of a sudden you're in, I'm going to be real skeptical of a judge as a judge of like, well, you were that bad one year
Whoa.
ago, you didn't enter, and now you think you can win this year. Like, you had to have had an amazing, amazing turnaround. And most agencies don't do that in a span of 12 months. So if you think you are like 12 months away, it is worth entering to show where you're at. But if you're more like 24 months away, maybe sit that year out.
Right, and that these submissions are not isolated. There is comparison and contrast to the previous year, and that's also a really good point because I think especially agency executives are so busy and all the things kind of forget like what did we say last year, and in some regards, and it really does matter. It is all interconnected. So any personal takes then on how you think about massive talent departures, layoffs, even the new biz win to loss ratio is kind of factors in like what matters most to just go through that consideration set even deeper.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of red flags that make it really hard for an agency to win. If you had one of the biggest client losses, individual client losses in a year, it's really hard to pick you as a winner. I mean, maybe, depending on some of these programs that have finalists or, lists, maybe you can squeak into one of those, but odds are you're not winning if you had one of the top two or three account reviews of the year and you lost that client. That is a bad one to have on your resume. Talent departures, I don't know if people evaluate. I never evaluated those as that important unless it was a role that has gone unfilled by the time the entry rolls in. And then revenue, you just got to be up. It's really, you'll almost never see an agency of the year winner be somebody that the judges knew was down year over year.
I think that it's important to note too that, there are instances that agencies that have more losses, but also big wins to back up and recoup revenue have won in these programs over agencies with zero client losses. Like sometimes there's this like fear and trepidation to like report the full losses or like have a loss, it besmirches the full record. But I think it's just the balance and the full context that matters.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that there was only ever one time where um talent turnover was a bit of a flag. And usually, every that 2 year itch is a real thing, right? And in this industry, like you having people move over into other agencies, it's not really like the biggest flag. It's when the volume's high, when it's like, oh, everybody's leaving at the same time. Maybe this is
Exodus.
it's a yeah, bit of an exodus. Like where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Like those are the things that like really jump out when you're looking at, especially if you are paying if culture is a part of that application. For some award systems, it's not, but for a lot of them, I know that like, even with Adweek, it was. Um, but I only ever remember that being a real standout thing when one happened when we were just like, "Hey, have you like checked LinkedIn lately?" A lot of people are leaving at the same time,
Right.
and yeah, like you would be surprised at like how details tend to jump out around this time. Like I agree with Jameson. I didn't necessarily look at it all the time because you just never know. There could be a million different reasons why people move on, and half of them aren't necessarily negative. But we will pay attention if there is like a very obvious mass exit that is going to factor
Got
in.
it.
Yeah, if I'm writing a daily newsletter and it almost becomes a bit every time somebody leaves the agency, and I'm like, look who else left, that I'm listing out like seven other people, like odds are it's not your year.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, it's like where you start to say, like, I need to have a side column for a specific agency. Oh, please don't let that be the case. So then in an industry known for bend and briefs and not always following instructions, how critical is it to follow the rules set out in the submissions?
It's so important. I mean, if you blatantly ignore our directions on something, I mean, it's not going to disqualify you, but it's going to piss us off. If like, if it comes down between you and another agency for something and you've just completely annoyed the hell out of us, I mean, it's natural instinct to probably ding you for that. So follow the instructions. It's not that hard.
Right. The one thing that I would point out is that those instructions are there for a reason. When you are reviewing literally hundreds of submissions, like time becomes extremely precious. So if there is like a bit of an annoying word count, or if there is a time limit on a reel, or if we're saying like, hey, to keep this fair, please only display 10 bits of work in this reel, and you try to overstuff it, it just becomes a little bit of like respect our boundary that's been set here. What I will say is that there is a re rule that you find extremely hard to follow for whatever reason. Just talk to the editors. Like just send an email, ask a question. It doesn't hurt to be like, "Hey, we have a really compelling story and 350 words really doesn't cover where we are. Can we get an extra like 100 words on like a scratch pad or whatever that case is?" Most will allow you that room because you asked, but don't try to pull the fast one. Like I know that everyone believes that they are the cleverest one in the room sometimes. Like just ask, just be upfront.
Right. Like again, the ad age folks, I remember for the winners for A-list, they asked folks to keep speeches as short as possible. Like, let's be fun with it. Let's do haikus. How many agencies did haikus? Not many, right? So it is a hard thing. So then I'm curious too, because at least one, I think in the calm circles that we talk about and kind of bringing this out in the open a little bit is work, right? There is sometimes that piece of work that's right on the edge of kind of eligibility where like you might be able to have a rough cut and the why, but it's not out in the ether. There may not necessarily be results, but it could be a really like a big piece of work, or it could be that first work that'll be out there by the time awards are announced from a new client that you haven't yet announced that you've won. Put it in, don't put it in. Is that breaking the rules? Is it on the edge of being able to tell your story and show you all something that, is like exciting and new? Because again, for Agency of the Year, it's like also for you guys, like the story that you'll be able to tell, right? So it's like getting to break that news about a new win potentially as part of agency of the year. Like those are those many things that make things more compelling. So tell me how you feel about that.
For me, it kind of comes down to a couple different factors. One, how much do I trust that person in agency doing the form? I encourage people to ask me beforehand and tell me about the situation, and then I'll say, yes, you can include that or not. Somebody I don't know or an agency that's burned me in the past, like I'll probably say, don't include it. And then the second thing is for me, that work has to be out by the time we're making our decision. So if like, the deadline is August and we're making our decision by late September. Like I want it in that 7 or 8 week period. If you're telling me like, hey, it's going to be late October, it's really hard for me to potentially trust that that is going to be out there and actually happen because I mean we all know stuff happens, shoots fall through, ideas, don't end up getting approved by legal. Something happens in the world, that you're like, oh, this is insensitive to do this now and it never ends up running. So as long as you know it's going to be out there by the time I tell you we're going to be making the decision, it's fine to include usually.
And then, since my husband and I fight over the relevance of cover letters, and y'all can guess where I stand on that particular battle, how do you think about like award write-ups versus case films or reels? Does one carry more weight?
I don't know if they carry more weight, but they do work pretty well together. Like I've changed, I've totally turned a corner on that stuff. Like, because before I was just like, do not give me any extra words. This is already like 10,000 words. Just give me the reel and I'll look at it. But the thing that I've learned being on the agency side of things is that like reels really catch a very specific point in a campaign's life. And it could be packed with results and all of this sort of like cultural context, and things can change in a week from the time that you finalize that bit of video. So a write-up allows you to squeeze in just a little bit more context that maybe you weren't able to get the first time around. So I would say that like you do benefit from having both and trying your best to have both. And because you have the trust of the age of the judging panel that they are going to look at all of it to make their decision, you do have more room to be like, hey, this is what you're about to see in the reel. Here's what you may not know, just based on the reel, and using that to your advantage. Um, yeah, I'm a both girl now. Before I wasn't, but now I am.
I'm shocked. I mean, we know each other, so I is like girl who writes really well is like love for the write up. No, 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 visual. Okay, like I'm gonna have to sit back and like sip my tea and digest this a bit. Jameson, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I prefer just give me a 10 or 15 minute video. If it's a film, just make it a film. Don't make it a case study. Like that would annoy me if it was pretty straightforward, just 30 or 60 second spot or like a short film, and then you get a case study about it that doesn't really tell you much. That annoys me. But 10 or 15 minutes, make it a reel. And I mean, my very basic metric and often was, does this get me excited about what advertising is capable of? If that reel can't get me excited about advertising, it's not a good reel.
Yes, agencies. So KPIs, right? Is win the award? No. One year, the KPI was we want the judges to dance while viewing our reel. So have fun with it. I will say though, on my end, like I have had the winning call, and hearing the rationale to say like the write up was what pushed over the edge versus the case film itself, especially. I think to your point, Shannon, about like the holistic picture and storytelling, where maybe it was a year you had like sturdy work, but a really compelling story about culture and kind of the side quest activities. And those, the write-ups is a place where you really get to put that piece of the story. So yes, they work together. Everything is very, very important. So leading, up to this conversation with you all, I have been temperature checking and connecting with a bunch of different comms folks in the industry. And one person was saying their new cautionary motto is percentages lie. So what are your thoughts on balancing and contextualizing data without getting too in the weeds?
It's a good question. Um, I mean, I think a good journalist and evaluator of these entries can kind of sniff out when percentages are bullshit and when we can see you're manipulating math. But added context is always great. If you're telling me, you're up 5% and we expected an agency your size to maybe be up 10 or 20%, giving us that context of why is really helpful. Because sometimes that 5% is actually really good. And we don't realize that it's actually really good. So that context can help. Same thing around retention rates and turnover. There's a lot of things you can do to manipulate that number. But usually we can sniff it out. I mean, I had one agency, and I'll get into more of my red flags later, but I mean, we had one agency that told us their retention rate was 99%. And we knew that was blatantly false. And when that agency got in trouble for something and I started calling up people, I learned it was way, 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 way below 99%. And that agency will never win another award that I would judge until that leadership team was gone because you literally can never trust them again.
Yeah, I think that you just have to be, I want to say smart, but also you have to understand that the judges that you're dealing with are smart as well. And like trying to fudge the numbers is an insult to everyone's intelligence. The big thing that I will say up front, you you putting down like your huge like megawatt number of impressions doesn't mean a ton because no one knows what they are, even the people that are calculating them. Like this is just the real of it. I think that we really do need to call to the carpet those those stats that we've as an industry come to rely on that we know are just total smoke shows and BS. If you put down that your ad garnered like 1 billion to like 13 billion impressions, that means that everybody in the globe watched that ad maybe twice over. Um, and we know that that's not the case. Like, definitely deal with the numbers that are real, and provide context, provide a story, like Jameson said, as to like why that number exists. But you deciding that you're just going to go with the highest number because it's a high number, and what do they know? They can't prove it. No, maybe we can't, but we also, you know, can sense when you're lying, and we're going to go with an agency that isn't going to lie to us.
Right. And also like I think just like the deeper truth there is just like what is a true metric of success? And you didn't know I was doing this, but we're having a separate chat with other folks about PR words specifically because it is such a sticky thing and that, impressions for the most part, it's like the least of these that comes to like what PR work can do and achieve and what success looks like. And tools are really fickle because like I totally know how you got to that number where it's like you get hit in the New York Times. That's like a massive, unique monthly visitors number. If you get two, you add those two numbers together because it's two separate hits, and then you have the world. And so it's like it is extremely misleading, but it's also what tools give. And I think for PR practitioners, like they know, but it feels really fake. And even like asking a lot of jurors to come back and say like what stood out to you and what didn't. And this isn't for Agency of the Year award specifically, but just like across the bend is I had a juror who said when the PR number was really clean, I didn't trust it. So if it's a nice like 12 million, I don't know, evil, vote down. But if it was like 12.326, you know what? That felt like really good to me. I mean, this juror was like so consciously like realizing, like, wait, I think I voted these things differently, like when there was a decimal point. So, yes, slicing and dicing and strategic with the numbers and changing it up, but the context, to your point, Jameson, like it really, really matters. I think, a strength in the industry is being someone who sucks with numbers. So I don't understand anything and asking questions about everything. Because sometimes I think we can be like really quick with account teams. We'll get a data point from a client and I'll say, what is this scale even mean? Like, oh, it's like a custom performance metric that the client created and it's how they measure things. And I was like, so we're living within a client's rubrics of success, and how do we even explain that? Or, a campaign that had a 3% year over year increase, is that 300 people, 3 million people? Like, there just needs to be some sort of base where, again, like the data in and of itself is not the thing. So almost more like than what it is, what does it mean to the business, to the agency? Just having a why with the number, I think can be really, really important. So then what do y'all feel is like the greatest missteps an agency can make, or something that make you really roll your eyes in a submission? To your point, Jameson, red flags.
I mean, dishonesty. I mean, if I catch you at a full out lie, like I know almost every person who submits one of these things is gonna exaggerate here, push the truth a little bit there. But if it's a flat out lie, I mean, you're done. You're done for that year. You're done for the foreseeable future, in my mind. I mean, I've had people who, straight up claimed, oh, zero layoffs. And then I find out afterwards, like, you cut 25% of your New York office and you lied to my face about it. Like, I'm never going to trust you again. I can't trust anything on that entry to be real. And so, I mean, that is the easiest way to bury yourself, is to just flat out lie and get caught. And then also just being really naggy about it. Don't text me at 6:52 in the morning begging to get on a short list. Just don't do it. Don't text me that early in general, but don't text me about an award trying to get on that short list at 6:52 in the
Oh,
morning after you called me at 8 o'clock at night the previous night begging your case. So don't do that.
Don't do that in general. Like whether you're
Yeah.
asking to have a campaign covered or you want to get like your executive, just don't. Just please do not do that. My big thing, and this is coming from a very wordy girl myself, don't use 8 words when four can do is always like my go-to when I'm talking about just talking about your agency in general. I There have just been like a bank of words that I have just come to really like loathe in just and I'm sorry, like I love words. If I hate a word, more than likely PR and comms have been holding the gun every single time because they love to talk about. Oh, and it's such a shame to say because I love my PR and comms people, I really do, and I know what they're up against when it comes to making sure that they are telling their agency story in the best light possible. And what I can say is there are ways to do that without padding the submission with just filler that you can't prove, that doesn't apply, that all it really does is work to convince yourself than it does to like convince me. Like we love our CEOs, we love our execs, the ones that we know are there to represent, but chances are they're not as innovative and marvelous and fantastic and wonderful and they're cutting edge and the things that they've done, they're innovators in the market. Okay, but are they? Because like the ones that are the best judges of that, I feel humbly, are the journalists that watch this work day in, day out, that can see it from a high level, that know when the thing that you're saying is, first of its kind. It's like, well, no, it's not. I literally just saw three campaigns in the past like 4 weeks that had the same idea or did the same thing. It's okay if you're not reinventing the wheel. It really is. Um, just really get down to the brass tacks of like what makes your agency so special without feeling this need to use $5,000 words that don't really apply. I think that that's why I've always loved your submissions, Katie, because they were always got down to the heart of like what we're looking for. Like, hey, this is why this matters. And you might not this work may not be like the sexiest, but here's what it did for our clients, and here's how it kind of changed the trajectory of business for that people. That's going to make way more of an impact than like, you know, Jane Doe is an innovative, fantastic, marvelous leader who is changing the trajectory and really hitting the cultural zeitgeist. It's like we know what you're doing because I've done
Yeah.
it. Um, just just get down to the heart of what makes it special. And if you have to use all of those pad words to get the submission over the line, again, really sit with whether or not this is your year to do it.
Yeah, and to add one thing to that of padding, like, if there's a question about sustainability and you're trying to make yourself look better and have a longer response, don't tell me you have lights that turn
Motion
off when
lights.
there's nobody in, like, that's a default setting in office buildings. That's not a sustainability initiative. Sorry. We
Come
got a lot of those
on,
at
come
Adweek. A
on.
lot of those.
One year, everyone had motion lights, and we were like,
Yep.
Okay, look,
The
what's
year of motion
happening?"
lights.
We got rid of
I
paper towels in the bathroom and we have hand dryers. Cool.
Solid, solid. Yeah, again, the why, right, behind it, which is like, and because of our tenant, this actually took like 2 years to do. And it was just so like, if you tell me it was really, really painful and you like fought the fight, like maybe, but for the most part, yeah, no. And again, like how it ladders to the big picture of like culture and work and other things. I think like this is that good moment where you all have to be Switzerland and I don't. So I can do my PSA to say, like, do not copy and paste your agency of the year submissions. These are not the same programs. They ask similar things and there's overlap, but weights and what matters and why, and the folks who are really reviewing, they are different. They care about different things. There are some programs that have more of, a weight and a layer to like provocation and like really poignant, artful creativity. And so you may have like badass work that has really good results, but it's really pragmatic in nature. That might not play as well in one program versus another. Or just the balance of like culture, where like you probably have the best creative work of any agency and has been written about left, right, and sideways, but you're really horrible to your people and they're all leaving. And the mass exodus that Shannon is mentioning, that sometimes actually can't be overlooked. I wish it was overlooked in all the programs, but I also know that that's not the case. And again, too, like I can say that one year an agency that I did a submission for that won in multiple programs, one editorial lead said, it was one of the first campaigns out of the pandemic for DoorDash, open for delivery, and the results were so significant. Like DoorDash flipped from third to first in the category, and it kind of hasn't looked back since when you think about it. And like that is just like was unquestionable, like met the moment, yay, go. And then in another program, the jurors felt like it was just too pragmatic. They applauded the results, but the agency didn't win. And it was some of the feedback, that some of these programs are judged by journalists. Some of these programs are judged by a hybrid of creative community and journalists. And some programs are judged purely by brand leaders. And so, what they care about and what they're looking for and how you speak to them are different. I have done a winning submission where literally it started off with, "You are wrong. Talking to you, judges, you are wrong. And we have beef with you." and it won. And so I think, it isn't about perfection. I think it's about truth and vulnerability and having a strong perspective and story per what you all have been saying. So let's flip from all the criticism to positivity train. For submissions that y'all have reviewed over the years, like, are there any key themes of what you find admirable or stand out?
Shannon, you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. I would say that, like, I think you kind of hit the point, Katie. Vulnerability really matters in a submission. Like, at the end of the day, it really helps to think like a journalist. And journalists love good stories at the end of the day. If your if your goal is to paint your agency as like this perfect, we have all the solutions from day zero, everything that we've done, we've hit it at the park. I mean, give it a shot. Maybe it'll work. But I know the ones that resonated with me more were the ones that were upfront and said, we had a real problem here. We couldn't figure this out for the life of us. We've stumbled more than once. Here's an example of how we stumbled, and here's an example of how we learned from that and fixed it for the next one. I think that's going to stick out more than just like the perfect slate or the perfectly clean slate. Um, like creativity is not an infallible thing. It's a lot of trial and error and figuring it out, and you making a mistake or you saying like, yeah, we did kind of like, not, I don't want to say miss the mark. That means something entirely different in PR speak now. But like, if you're saying like, yeah, we figured out that, this isn't, we thought that this is what our clients wanted. And then when we sat with our clients, we're like, actually, we want something different. That shows really great client relations that you sat and really took that feedback and took it to heart and applied it. I'd rather read a submission that is about, you know, having a problem and finding a solution and really displaying your talent as problem solvers than being the perfect golden boy agency. Like those things just don't stand out because again, half the time we're like, are you sure? Like is that, do you mean that? So really consider peeling back some of, wiping away some of that sheen and just being real with your agency story because I think that that's going to resonate way more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean it's all about the story. I would say when we were judging Ad Week, there was probably one category a year where we were between two agencies that a lot of great success. And we would sit there and go, at the end of the day, we got to write an interesting, compelling story about one of these agencies. And the agency that could articulate a really interesting story, odds are was the one that we would pick. And to Shannon's point about vulnerability, I'll give a real life example of, Joan. They were a business that they had built. It was like a project-based, product business. Like they had productized their services in like the 2010s. It was boom or bust for them. They were hiring, they were firing. They were just, it was hard to, while the business was successful, it was hard to stay successful constantly. And so they used the pandemic year to retool their business, try to become more of an AOR business. It worked. They won a ton of AORs, more than an agency their size should ever win in a year. It had good work to go with it. And they were honest with us. They're like, what we built worked, but it also really didn't work for our people and the culture here because it was causing problems. And they took the opportunity to rethink their business and it worked. And so because they were vulnerable, if they just had come to us and said, yeah, we transitioned to more of a AOR based model without hinting that the old model caused them problems, I don't know if their narrative would have been strong enough to win.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. Jones' submission was probably one of my favorites that year just because it was like sitting at the table with a friend and being like, look, this is what worked and this is what didn't, and we had to go back to the drawing board. It's like great. That was a great way to communicate that. And I think in that same year, there was a category where it was between um a big agency that was doing a lot of very splashy TV work like really incredible, like Super Bowl after Super Bowl after Super Bowl, versus an agency that wasn't doing quite as much splashy work, but was doing enough really great work and was able to tell a story of an agency that was really looking to change the industry. Um, and that agency won over all the splashy work because, like, you could have a submission with 10 pitch perfect Super Bowl ads, but at the end of the day, that is still a submission with 10 of the same type of ad. Like,
Right. Right. And that's a really good point because we talk a lot about this. Like, this agency of the year. This isn't one hit wonder. So, I have always been coached on just like the showing diversity, the ability to do great work either in multiple industries
mhm,
or, multiple execution types where like, if you want to be social agency of the year, influencer agency of the year, go for it. But agency of the year, like there is like a level of dimensionality that you need to see in the submission once provided.
yeah. And
Yeah.
it's with stuff like that, it's, you know, when you're dealing with a room full of journalists, like we do nothing but ask questions all day. Like when we see something like that, it's like, well, all this work is great, but we also see that they have all these other services here. At least that's what their site says. It says that you do
Mm,
social. It says that you do strategy work. Where is the stuff that
right,
displays that?
right.
So really take a look
Yeah.
and like say, okay, are we telling the whole story? And if there's something that's preventing us from telling the whole story, how
Mhm.
can we communicate like where we really are
And
without, doing a bunch of padding and gymnastics?
And coming back to that point about like knowing your audience and knowing that people have reviewed, I think it's also recognizing like what the perceptions of your agency are. So, even down to the order of the work that you put in the reel. Like you could go for the expected, what, everyone thinks are your greatest hits and actually flip the order around to say and show like put greatest hits sometimes in the middle to surprise people and like really you know, I think it just helps you accentuate the diversity of what you've done and offer versus like the expected, the certain brand. Um, so let's keep going. So Shannon, you've been on both sides of the equation, reviewing and judging and crafting winning submissions. So if you could get close to the mic and tell those editorial jurors some things you wish they knew about the process of entering from the other side, what have you got to share?
I would say that, like, I mean, judges, they've been doing this for years, so they already know a lot of this stuff. But what I will say is, like, a year is not a ton of real estate. It's not as much real estate as you think to do all of the things, especially if you are a young agency. So when you're looking at an application that deals a lot with not just work but culture, like it takes a few years to establish a working culture. So I would say that like it helps to have like a little bit of mercy with especially like your younger agencies, even once they exit that breakthrough stage. Because I know usually the breakthrough stage is 5 years. Establishing a good program or establishing multiple program can take 6 or 7 years for that to work. Just it sometimes it takes a year just to talk about a program.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having that understanding really helps when it comes to really judging a culture. So that's like the biggest thing that I would probably point out.
And then it would be remiss of me to like not acknowledge that, the point of submitting for agency a year isn't always to win. I think Jameson, you were kind of covering some of this at the top of our conversation of like just you review year to year and like give me a sense of where you are. And that is sometimes a valid exercise. It can be a learning opportunity because you really don't totally know how you do if you didn't really shoot your shot and could really compare. Um, your submissions. Journalists might find story ideas within submissions or learn about your agency in a way that could benefit opportunities in the future. I know an example I have is a special open source brief framework. An agency I worked for that we mentioned in one submission ended up being an interactive session for the Ad Age Small Agencies Conference. So it became, a speaking opportunity for the agency. So I'm curious, Jameson, do you have anything else you'd want to add about kind of the bigger picture of like when you submit for an award, this is like how we use that, how we look at that, like stories that stick with me, things I might follow up on.
Yeah, I mean, if you have something really unique about your agency that, you feel like is a good PR win for you, and an earned opportunity for you, like hammer that home in the entry because, if I see something really interesting about somebody and I know they're not going to win, at some point I may follow up and be like, hey, I do want to talk to you about this. And while that's not winning, that's still a pretty good outcome from your agency of the year entry. I mean, I'll give one example that I've spoken about publicly of, Pierre Odell, had a really unique way of how they thought about growth and how they used their chief growth officer. And, that they laid the groundwork in their agency of the year entry. I met with them later. They kind of hammered home what it was about, but like that original idea of what was so unique about them started in an agency of the year entry. And then when they had business results to back it up, where they came away with like 7 wins in a short period of time, it became a no-brainer for us to do like a kind of mini feature about how they think about growth and what all entails in growth within that organization. And it wasn't just about new business, it was about talent too. And so it became a really obvious story to tell. But that was a nugget that started in an agency of the year entry that turned into a massive win for them from a PR standpoint. But it was good for us too, because it was a great story for us to tell.
Right, right. Okay, so last question and a bit of a bonus level in this conversation because many agency of the year programs have subcategories where it could be team or people based. And so quick hits, what do you feel are the most resonant approaches for people or team categories or things that you would poke your eyes out with a fork if you saw to help guide folks?
I I say this with love. I'm gonna hold everyone's hands when I say this. Like there is a big difference um between basically, oh God, how do I say this without being a jerk? Some people are doing an exceptional job and some people are just doing their jobs. We love everybody. If we had an opportunity to give everybody a trophy and an award, we would. But if your submission reads as someone just doing what they were hired to do, they clock in, they clock out. It doesn't matter how much you like them or how much even I like them. It's going to be very hard to justify a win like that, as opposed to like someone who is actually doing something to kind of shift how we perceive someone in that role um to be. So be very judicious about who you put up for those people awards, not just for us, but for yourselves, because putting them together in a submission requires a lot of resources and a lot of time. And please just give your comms person just a break. And please don't make them write a 350 word essay about a person that like you really like, but you can't tell a compelling story about. That's what it really is at the end of the day is, make sure that there's a reason that we're talking about them.
Right. And to your point, it's like it is their story. So leave it coming from the PR side, you see a lot of submissions where like you're accounting all the success for the entirety of the agency to a person. And like there's just no way that person really did all of those things versus like it's okay to have like a smaller story, but like ownable. Like this person drove these things in this way, or sometimes I think people mix up the just hunger to like rattle all the wins and accolades of a human. So it's like this like rapid fire bullet list. And then there's like no depth and there isn't really a red thread. So like, is there something that's more thematic and like give me like three things with depth and proof points and backing it up versus 25 things I'm just like can't fully get the true punch of what they've accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
I
about you,
mean, the other thing
Jameson?
I'll add to that is it's painfully obvious to an editor or journalist when you're going on a PR blitz for one specific executive. If I see that person show up on an ad age list and then an ad week 50 or a campaign, I think leading woman, I forget what, or was some of the individual campaign awards. If they show up in like two or three things in a row and then it's like my turn to evaluate them, like it's obvious you are just putting that person forward for everything and you're putting all your eggs in one basket for one person and it's just an obvious PR blitz for that person. It's really unappealing. It's really unappealing. Like it says to me a lot about your agency if you're only putting one individual forward for all of these different awards and not two or three people from your C-suite across all these different publications because there's so many opportunities to highlight people. And if it is the same exact, it's like, what does that say?
And look below
Yeah,
your C-suite is another thing. There's so much amazing things that are happening below your C-suite. Like,
yes, yes. Yes, can we give like a shout out to David Griner on this? He would always say like I don't really want to talk to your chief creative officer, but I want to talk to the people who work for your chief creative officer. And if I really see like power, mentorship, and then maybe I'll talk to the chief creative officer. And that has always stuck with me. So flip it, the classic journalist question, am I missing anything? Any last like tips, advice that we can send all the humans off and like may the odds be ever in their favor?
just hug your comms person, please. Like, do something. Send them a bar of chocolate, send them breakfast. Like, these submissions are no joke, and they take so much time and effort, and you have to follow a bunch of arbitrary deadlines outside of the actual deadline itself. And they sometimes take Herculean efforts to wrangle all of a talent pool just to get the answers that they need to make these submissions even work. So from an agency standpoint, like please tell them thank you profusely and then follow that up with a nice infusion of cash or a breakfast. Um yeah, that's my big thing. And yeah, best of luck to everybody.
Yeah, similarly, just from my perspective, if you win, don't send me some really expensive thank you gift afterwards. I can't accept it. I will give it away. And if it ever got out that I did keep an expensive gift from the agency, which I haven't, I've always given them away, destroys my credibility too. When I didn't ask for it and you sent it to me anyway. Don't do that.
Don't put him in that position.
Yes, yes. I will think less of you for that.
There you have it. Jameson, Shannon, thank you for the conversation. I hope that this nets tighter, more compelling entries and also maybe it just up levels how we think about our stories and what we can achieve in that big picture to hopefully win some of these accolades.
Hmm.
All right, here, here. Until the next one, y'all take care. Thank you so, so much.
Of course, thank you.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Yeah.